John's been a friend and acquaintance for a long time. He serves the church well in DFW and beyond, and just thinks through logistical type things and facility type things that, frankly, a lot of churches just aren't good at thinking about, especially not to the depth that he's given himself to serve the church in that way. So he offered to meet with folks who are in rental and lease agreements and this kind of stuff, and I jumped at the chance. And if other folks jump in, we'll just kind of integrate them into the conversation. But I'll let John tell you more about his history and heart and that kind of stuff. But he's a really good guy, and he's gonna serve you guys well as we chat about these things. So let me pray and remind us that even facilities and lease agreements are spiritual because they're under the sovereign rule of the Lord. And God, would you remind us of that? And would you make this next few minutes we have together certainly an act of service to these planters and pastors, Lord, but even more than that, would you help them be a act of worship to you? Would you help us to steward the gifts you've given us well? Would you help us to steward the season well? Would you help us to consider how we can best glorify you with facilities, without facilities, with digital chat rooms and videoed services, and when we're back together in person and everything between, God? You are over all and in all and through all, and so you're in this conversation and you care about these things. So I pray that you would worship you for the next little bit. It's in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Well, like I said, I'm here in Carrollton, Texas. Our company is Church Realty, and we exist to serve the church with all their real estate needs. So all of you are starting as church planners. You're either meeting in a temporary space like a school, a movie theater, a recreational center, maybe in a home. And then after that, you go look for your first lease space. And I love working with church planners. It's one of my favorite things to do is to go find spaces. I understand that as a church planter, you are wearing multiple hats. Not only are you the pastor, the lead counselor, you're trying to work around budgets and facilities and all that kind of thing. And then you're also driving around town looking for space, just handling everything. Plus you're probably a husband and maybe a father. And so you've got a lot of things on your plate. So where I have the opportunity to work with church planners, I love that because I think I can fill a part that allows you to do the things that you as pastor and leader and visionary need to do and allows us to come alongside you. So I really enjoy that part of what I consider my ministry. My vocation is to serve pastors and church planters in that need. In this season of the COVID-19 crisis, as soon as it started, I had churches calling me saying, "Oh, we're locked out of our space. We can't meet there anymore. What do we do?" So that in the first couple of weeks, it was, "Hey, find us another place." And it was like, well, forget it. We got to go digital, right? So I've been spending the last few weeks looking forward so that when we start to gather again, what does that look like? And so kind of two topics. One, what is it going to look like when we start gathering again? And then how do we handle current conversations if you're in a permanent lease? Just by raise of hands or something, how many of you are currently just in a one-day-a-week space, like a school or a theater? Okay, let's see, 3 of you. Okay, 4. Does anybody have their own 7-day-a-week lease space? Okay, 2. And then so there's 2 conversations. So let me start with the permanent lease space. If you have a permanent lease space, you're probably able to make your April 1st payment okay. You met 2 or 3 times in March, so you may have been able to make that payment. The payment looming on May 1st and potentially in June may be a little bit tougher for you to make. And so one of the articles I wrote that I sent to Ben was just basically about rent relief requests. Approaching your landlord with a specific request. Have any of you guys applied for the PPP funds, payment protection plan? Were you successful with getting those?
We're still in the pipeline.
Nothing's been,
okay. Yeah.
Well, hopefully Congress will get their act together and we'll have the funds and get that. So that will help you in some ways. But many landlords are working with tenants on their rent payments. They may not be just forgiving them, but they may be saying, hey, we'll give you the next 2 months off, but we're going to tack 3 or 4 months on to the end of your lease, meaning that they're going to recoup the money they would have got from you. They're just going to get it at the end of your lease. So my encouragement to you, if you're in a permanent lease space, is approach your landlord with a specific request. Communicate, hey, look, we're still meeting, we're still having giving. It may be down, but we're still in operation. We're doing ministry in our community. We're serving those in need. Communicate that to your landlord. Now, a lot of landlords I've worked with over the years are not Christians. We've worked with some landlords who are, and that's great. But some landlords, you as the pastor and leader of that church, you're the only Christian that is coming into contact with him right now. And so I encourage you to be gracious and patient with these landlords. Some landlords are in good position and they can defer payments for a season. Some are highly leveraged and missing lease payments for a month or two are putting them in a crisis. So I would encourage you, go specifically with a plan, be gracious and patient with them, offer a solution. Say, hey, look, I'm not asking you for a freebie. I'm saying we'll come back to you and we'll pay you this rent later, but we'll extend our lease. But offer a solution and really have a plan. So we can answer some more questions about that. But for those of you in a permanent lease space, I would encourage you to look at your budget, consider what you need to do, what you need to ask for from your landlord, and engage them with grace and peace as much as you can. Before I move on, any questions about that? Any good experiences with landlords so far? Josh, your landlord been
Yeah, I actually didn't even, we didn't even have to ask for anything. They volunteered a half a month to us for free. And actually what we, I responded to their offer to have them just write us a check for half the amount so that they could defer it or they could count it as a donation. And I'm guessing that when they defer payments, they probably get a tax break anyway. I'm not sure whether that's the case, but
I'm not sure if they would be able to do that just by deferring rent. The way you did it, yes, they might be able to, but I don't know if deferring rent, that'd be something that each landlord would need to check with their own CPA about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll tell you, when it comes to talking with landlords, or maybe even if I'm trying to buy a building and I'm talking about the value of a contribution letter, I've learned over the years to not tell the landlord or that owner how my contribution letter is going to affect them, because I've learned it affects everybody differently. Okay. So, but the way you did it, I think, was really good, because it allowed them, if they give you a donation, then you could send them a tax letter at the end of the year.
Yeah, so they were pretty happy about that suggestion.
That's good. That's good. Okay, well, let's talk real quick about venues. If you're in a school, a theater, a public space, and you're meeting there one day a week, the biggest thing I want you to think about is just being prepared, because I don't know how this is going to change things. None of us know. We know that we're not going back to normal. We're going to go back to a new normal. And so one of my concerns has been, what if a school district, you're in a school building, the school district comes back and goes, we don't want to have you in here any longer because we're going to be cleaning our buildings on Saturdays and Sundays. And so now you can't meet here. So before that conversation happens, I wanted to coach as many planters as I could, people that are in a school, to approach the school district first, or the movie theater, understanding that they look at you in two lenses. The first lens is an income lens, and they will still need income, whether it's a theater, school, public space, they will like to have the income. But the second lens they look at you through is a liability lens. There's some school districts, some places that just do not like having schools or churches in their buildings. They see it too much of a risk, either politically or risk liability-wise. Now, they may have a heightened sense of that saying, hey, on a Sunday morning, we're having 300 people in our building, and we don't know who that was and what they did and what they did or did not clean. So my recommendation to you would be to go to your landlord and talk to them and say, hey, we have a plan moving forward. Once you open your buildings back up, we're going to have a cleaning team. We are going to be sterilizing everything we use. Maybe we're just going to be doing family church. We're not going to have kids in classrooms for the first 6 months or I don't know how long it's going to be, but I know that's one of the topics of just doing family church and not having a nursery. Explain to them your plan. Make sure you have a plan to leave the space better than you found it. I've even had conversations with people go in and have ozone machines running in the space just to make sure that it's clean. I drove past Chick-fil-A the other day, and they had on their doors, our environment is cleaner than it usually is because we have filters running in here to make sure it kills disease or whatever. So you may have to take some new steps. You may have to spend a little bit of money to continue to use the space that you used before, so that you don't lose the space. So I would encourage you to be proactive, have that discussion, figure out what you can do, because if you don't, they will assume the worst, and they may just come to you and say, hey, look, we don't want to do this. And so that was something they may change how they operate. So we may have to change how we do it so that we can continue to worship in that space. So before I move on to other things, what questions or thoughts do y'all have? Those of you that are meeting are you meeting in a school or a theater, or what spaces are y'all using?
So we're meeting in a school, a local elementary school. And okay. I've had a difficulty connecting with the district in general. They haven't been answering the phones. So we know we're on a month-to-month payment, so we stop payments. We're in good standing with the district and with the principal, with the people who make all the decisions we're in good standing with. But I haven't been able to really reach out and talk to anybody about what this looks like after these restrictions are lifted. And so I'm not exactly sure how to get in contact with the individuals who I need to get in contact with.
So some schools, that's a good comment. So some schools, the principal's the decision maker. At this point, I'll bet you that's been taken away from principals. It is going to be a school district-wide policy. Usually there's a director of facilities at the school district that deals with these kind of contracts and stuff. So if you're in Fort Worth, we may need to look up, and if I can help you, I will. But just look up on the school district website, director of facilities. It's usually a senior level role that reports directly to the school board. And so there's times where I've gone and sat down, for example, in Frisco, for the longest time, they would not rent out a high school. And they had a tax vote a couple of years ago that did not go the way the school district wanted. And so a new person had come into that director of facilities role. And I went and met with that guy and said, hey, let me tell you something. You guys are building over the next few years 16 high schools in Frisco. You've traditionally not had churches in a high school, but I could fill every one of them if you guys would entertain that. And so I took Watermark over there, and Watermark went in one of their high schools, and they've had a great experience. But that could change after this crisis. So again, I think the number one thing to do is to engage them, show them you have a plan, understand that it's not like it used to be, and make sure you leave the space better than you found it. So that may mean you pay some company to come in and do cleaning afterwards, or you have a cleaning team afterwards. One thing I don't know, this is my prediction. Whenever they tell us, here in Texas, I think they're going to tell us probably in June that the churches can start meeting again. Technically, they said it yesterday, but there's still the number, that was a legal thing that they said, yes, churches can meet again. But there's still going to be the restrictions of number of people and such. I expect that when we do start meeting, only about 50% of people are going to flock back to meeting. There's going to be a lot of people who are still going to be nervous. So it's not like we're going to come in and say, hey, we're going to have 300 people in your building again. We're going to slowly do this. We're going to do multiple services, or we're going to space out our chairs. We're going to have people opening the doors so we're not touching all of your stuff. I just think there's things we can put into place to show them that we're being proactive. The churches that have the best relationships with schools do it excellent. They don't cut any corners. And they have an answer for everything when the school district has a question. So in my mind, if you just think a liability, what are the things that a school district would see that might cause them for you not to be there? It's the cleaning, the sanitation, the things they have to do to make the space ready for Monday. Then we need to answer those up front. The more of a plan we can show them, the more likely they are to work with us. What other thoughts, questions y'all have on that? Anybody have anything in the space or the people, the place you're meeting? Any obstacles?
We're meeting in a chapel right now of another church, and yeah, just 5 or 6 weeks ago, we're in negotiations to move to a hotel conference room, which that all got kind of hit pause on that for the foreseeable future. So hopefully, whenever this gets back to normal. Is there anything specific to a hotel space? It's just like a kind of a conference room kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think hotels are going to be anxious for the income, and their liability may not be as much as a school district might. The liability lens may not be as strong as a school district would. So again, I think it's saying, hey, look, we're going to set up the spaces, how we're going to use it. We expect we're going to have X amount of people, and we're going to make sure that we clean it up after we're done. Being in a hotel, they may say, you know what, we have a sanitation team. We're going to do that. We have a staff that does that. So you may be okay there. But, traditionally, if somebody's meeting in a school, they have one janitor on staff when you're in there. Whereas in a hotel, they may have, quite a bit of janitorial staff. So that may still work for you. And I think their liability lens will be less. Their income lens will be because hotels are pretty empty right now.
Yeah.
We're meeting on a week-to-week basis at a YMCA, and we just set up the gym as a kind of sanctuary type setting. And what we know of the YMCA is that they have local CEOs that are kind of overseeing like maybe 3 or 4 of them in the city or whatever. And the one that is our CEO is a pretty strong believer and very supportive of churches meeting in YMCAs. I didn't realize this, but there's like a whole network of churches that are in YMCAs. And so I just heard recently from the CEO that through a relationship with another YMCA church that I have, that they're talking about even letting us back before maybe the YMCA would be opened if legally they could. So ton of support there from what we know, but that's all I kind of have.
That's great. I mean, the YMCA is a great place to be. I just encourage you in your conversation with them just to say, hey, look, we're gonna take the lead in making sure we leave the space better than we found it. And just any safety protocols you can put together will go for you in the long run. I mean, all the gyms opening, I don't know how they're going to do that. I mean, you're going to schedule time to come and work out. That's probably how the gyms are going to open back up, and they're going to have each machine sanitized or something in between workouts. That's the only way I can see the gyms doing it. Just seems like trouble if they don't.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have any contacts for cleaning services? My question is based in this. The school district, knowing the people who I know there, they're not going for us cleaning it and considering it being clean. And so, if there's any credible services that you know of, I would like to know who they are. And
yeah, let me think about, see if there's any on the Tarrant County side. Let me think about that. I'll get something for you if I can find it. I don't know right off the top of my head an exact cleaning service, but I know there are folks that can come in behind you and do a good job. I'm just not sure on the Tarrant County side who that is, but I'll see if I can find something for you.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking, just liability's sake, if we have a company come in that's certified to clean XYZ types of bacteria, viruses and such, that saves us the trouble of them saying, well, somebody caught something because of our presence. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the school district may say, well, we want you to use this group, and, you know, they may have a group that they're talking to. I would imagine the schools are stepping up. I mean, they're already talking about how this winter, this next flu season, there may be a reoccurrence of it. So I'm sure the schools are going to put new practices in place. So, you know, you may be able to say, hey, look, if y'all have somebody in place, we'll just tack a little fee on for the times we're there. You're probably paying the janitor, I don't know, $100 to be there. So maybe there's a service fee that goes in for that, for the extra cleaning they'll have to do for you. We'll just have to see what they're planning to do. Let me encourage you this. Aaron, did you have something? I think you were unmuted. Oh, you know.
Well, I was just going to say to the dude at Pillar that you might offer to pay the school the extra cost to use their own personnel that they already trust and they already have contracted, or whatever they do. Just as one of your proposals, as you're prepared to give them a plan as one of the options.
Thank you. I agree. So I think one of the other trends that we're going to see coming out of this is church planners that are going to want their own 7-day-a-week space. So those of you that have been in a 1-day-a-week space, once you got locked out, you had to start doing virtual, online church, either from your church office, if you had a church office space, from a home, a garage, wherever you, maybe another church has offered their space. I know some churches have said, hey, come broadcast or record from here. I think there's going to be some churches that said, hey, we've been in the 1-day-a-week space. We need to get ourselves ready to have a storefront that's 4,000 square feet or something, that if this happens again, at least we have a place we can go to and meet. And so one of the things a lot of church planners struggle is getting to that level, saving up the cash you need. So if you're going to go get a lease space, you're generally going to go look for at least 4,000 to 6,000 square feet. That's going to seat probably 150 to 200 and give you a few classrooms. If you need more than 4 or 5 classrooms and seat more than 200, you're probably looking at a minimum probably of 10,000 square feet. But if you're going to have a space like that, you either need to find something that's already been a church, or you're going to need to get a space and convert it. The most expensive part of getting that lease space a lot of times is getting a shell space and converting it. I've known churches have spent $200,000-$300,000 just converting a 3,000 square foot retail space. So one of the things that I'm talking with a couple of the pastors I've worked with in the past, a friend of mine in McKinney, when he went and took the role of lead pastor of the church he's at, they had 7 people, I think. Maybe it was 8, 10. It wasn't very many. But as they started rebuilding that church, they put into effect surplus budgeting. Do you know what I mean when I say surplus budgeting? Okay, so if last year's budget was $200,000 tithes and offerings that came in, instead of the next year's budget being $210,000, expecting growth, so 105 to 110%, instead of going to 210 or 220 for the next year they lived on 190 or 180. And so what they did is they built in 10% savings in the next year's budget. So just because 200 came in this year didn't mean, we're going to get more than 200 next year. So the exact way they did is they lived off of 90% of what came in the previous year. So if 200,000 came in, then the next year they lived off of 180. What that allowed them to do, it allowed them to put cash aside. And you know what? If they went over 200, instead of putting $20,000 aside, they put 20 or 40 or whatever that number was. That allowed them to live in a place to where when there was an emergency or when there was an opportunity, they could seize that. And so a lot of times one of the toughest things is to save up money for a lease space, for a purchase, whatever it is. And so putting in that surplus budgeting is kind of countercultural. A lot of people say, well, next year we're going to grow. So if we had 200 this year, we're going to get 225 next year. And so sometimes that can put you behind the 8 ball. And so that's something that I'm encouraging churches that are looking at next year's budget, if they have the opportunity to do, because like right now, I'm hearing people that are having 10, 15, 20, 40% reduction in giving for this month. Surplus budgeting can be a safety net for that. So just thinking about that, because you know that if you're going to get a lease space or you're going to prepare to buy something, I mean, Ben and I have talked over the years about buying properties. You got to have cash reserves. And not only do you have to have, if you're buying something, you have to have 20 to 30% down, but you also have to have 6 months of operating capital in the bank. Unfortunately, a lot of churches don't have 6 months of operating capital in the bank. And in this kind of situation today, we need that. I think banks are going to require that even more than they did before. So thoughts, comments on that, questions? You got them.
John, what do you say to the church that began a generosity campaign on February 1st and put a pause on it 3 weeks in because of all this that's happening?
Yeah, you push a big pause button and you seek to see when's the right time for your church to restart that. I think a lot of how I would make that decision is how is giving gone in April? You know, are you down 10% or are you down 50%? If you're slightly down, then you say, hey, folks, we know that you may not be able to give towards this campaign right now. It's open. If you want to and are able to, go ahead and give. But if not, we're going to kick this back off in the fall or next January. I think it depends a lot on the demographics of your church. I mean, do you have a lot of people, if you're a church in Houston right now and all that money was coming from the oil business, those campaigns are going to come to a stop whether the church pushes a pause button or not. They're going to come to a stop. So, and to some extent, maybe up here in North Texas as well. So I would be sensitive to just understanding your context and your people and communicate. I think here's the thing about giving. I think if you as a church can communicate how you are still doing ministry, the way I've said it, ministry has not slowed down. Are any of you working more hours than you did before? I mean, most pastors I'm talking to are saying, hey, I'm working more hours now than I did when we were gathering. Okay. So that needs to be communicated to your people because ministry is on the rise through this. We have more opportunities. There's going to be a great harvest of people that are seeking God through this situation. And so they're engaging with you on Facebook or YouTube or Zoom or whatever it is you're using. So you're not slowing down, and it costs money to do much of ministry. One of the churches, the church I was talking about that did the surplus budgeting, I think it's every Monday, they're doing a food drop off in their parking lot where people can come and pick up produce and stuff. Produce trucks pull up in the front church parking lot and they're feeding the community. I mean, tell those stories of what your people are doing. If you're in a shopping center, frequent that restaurant with your people. Keep that business open. What a witness to that restaurateur in your shopping center or in your neighborhood who's struggling to make ends meet. If your people can order some food from them. So there's ways I would say you can keep capital campaigns open, but the pause button is really the right thing to do, Aaron. And then when you turn it back on is really going to kind of depend on when our economy gets going. I wouldn't tell them stop giving, but I'd say, hey, we understand that times have changed. We're still going to keep doing ministry though.
John, I have a question for you. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
I wonder if this is regarding your question, Aaron. I wonder what that looks like to people who might be losing their job. And maybe you could speak to this, John. Like if I've lost my job and we're raising capital for a building program, I wonder what the optics look like for that. I wonder if maybe you could just say, hey, this fund has dual purpose. We don't know what the future looks like. And, our plan is going to move forward. Like we want to buy a building. But what if we also designate this as a potential benevolence fund in the event that this thing goes out of control and people need money. We could dip into that to help people. I just worry about what that, I mean, people are skeptical, I think, already of capital campaigns when it comes to churches. And so, like, I wonder if the timing of this right now, with so many people losing their jobs and people getting sick, that this may be the time to say it could also be used for this. But plans moving forward, maybe we build. I don't know.
Sure. So I personally, I signed a note or a commitment card in November towards a campaign at my church. I had plans to write a big half of what I had committed in April. But two of my deals hit the big pause button and they haven't closed yet. So I just can't give it. Now they haven't announced that we're stopping it. When I can give it, I will. And I think many of your people the same way. When they can, they will. Is there a way to rebrand? I mean, I always call the funds that I tell churches to put aside as a future facilities fund. If you want to call it a future ministry fund, I'm a big believer that churches should save money for a rainy day like today or for ministry opportunities that come up. I worked with a church one time. They were meeting in a YMCA, and they had a healthy budget. They had over 700 people coming to them in the YMCA, and the pastor prayed for a specific building to come available. And he had tried to buy it and was unable to do it. Finally, a guy bought it, was willing to sell or finance the building to this church, which that functions like a lease to purchase. I get churches all the time. Do you have any lease to purchase options? Not very often, but this opportunity came in front of him to be able to do that. He subscribed to every dollar in, every dollar out. The dollar came in, we have to spend it because people are giving it, so we got to do ministry. It came to the point he did not have good financial records, didn't have any cash on hand, and he lost the opportunity to buy that building that he had prayed for, that he had circled, that was going to give him a perfect opportunity because he didn't save any cash. So, Josh, the answer to your question, I think, is yes, be sensitive to your people and that you have people that have lost jobs. You're not asking them, you're not sending them, hey, you're late on your commitment. You're sensitive to the fact that some people cannot give at this time. And maybe you say, hey, folks, should we have the opportunity, and get your leaders to say, hey, we want to have the opportunity that if we need to serve people with some of these funds, that the church is not a building. The church is the people. And right now, we need to serve people. The reason my project that I was going to have closed didn't close in April wasn't because the two churches couldn't do it. It was because they said, in this crisis, we want to minister to people. We don't think the optics of buying a building this month works. So they hit the pause button. So I think being sensitive to that, knowing the things you need to do, as opposed to the things you want to do and the things you shouldn't do. I mean, this is a real clarifying time. In the last week, I made some unsolicited offers on land and one church building, understanding that church is not listed for sale, that church building is not listed for sale. But in the case that they might sell it, I wanted them to know that we would be interested in buying it. And so I placed that offer in there. Sometimes I do that in a church's name. Sometimes I do it anonymously and tell them, hey, there's a local church that wants to buy your building. In the right time, we'll tell you who it is.